Probably the last time we thought about explorers was when we were in school. Brave souls who, with the help of the friendly natives, blazed the way into the New World. Which brings us to the most famous explorer of all time, Christopher Columbus.
500 years ago, an Italian seaman stepped upon the stage of history with a daring plan for reaching the East by sailing west. Many thought he'd fall off the earth. Europeans still believed the world was flat. Christopher Columbus would prove it was round.
I know we've all supposedly wised up about Christopher Columbus. We've taken him from the good guy column of history and we put him in the bad guy column of history. But we still get him wrong. He wasn't the first European to discover America, and he wasn't the first person to prove that the world is round. We decided to start our own exploration for the real Columbus by going to where else but Columbus, Ohio. We figured if anybody knew the facts about this famous Italian, it would be the people who live here. The first thing we wanted to see was if people know what Columbus looks like. We went to Mike's barbershop to find out. We have got 6 pictures here, and I want you to pick out Christopher Columbus, all right? We asked half a dozen people to pick out Columbus.
Christopher Columbus?
We promised the winners a free haircut. The people of Columbus were game. There's number 1.
Looks like your brother. I think I'm gonna fail this.
Here's number 2. Here's number 3. Here's number 4.
This isn't a trick, is it?
Here's number 5. And here's number 6. And the answer is?
Number 4.
Well, guess what? You're right.
How about that?
And I think it's number 5.
You're right. That's Columbus.
Hey.
I'm gonna guess number 4.
You're going to guess number 4. Well, guess what? You're right. That's Christopher Columbus.
Is it really?
Yeah. But you like number 6.
Well, I like it, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, guess what? You're right. But you know what else? They're all Christopher Columbus.
Are you really?
No, they're all of them Columbus, huh?
Because nobody has a clue what Columbus looks like. Are you a little mixed up that they can all be Columbus?
Well, you see, I never met him in person before.
That's the problem, isn't it?
It's a major problem, and I believe not only mine.
Just for fun, we wanted to see if students at Harvard University could do better on our little test than the people of Columbus. Want to make a guess? All right.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
I think I would probably have to go with this guy.
Number 4.
Yes.
I want to tell you, you're right.
Yes.
This is Columbus.
Excellent.
And guess what? This is Columbus.
Oh, yeah.
And this is Columbus.
Aha.
They're all Columbus.
Aha.
So, of all these, you think number 5?
I think it's number 5, am I right?
That's Christopher Columbus. Yeah, but first we got to tell you, they're all
wrong.
Christopher
Are
Columbus.
they really?
Yeah.
Oh my God! See, I told you it was gonna be a trick.
We don't know what Columbus really looked like because no one painted his portrait while he was alive. The only thing we know for sure is that he was blonde and he had a hooked nose. Okay, so the people of Columbus were a little bit confused about how Chris looked. That's understandable. But they all knew one thing. They knew that Christopher Columbus discovered the world is round. Everybody knows that about Columbus. Columbus discovered the world is round.
Christopher, my boy, the Earth is as flat as this orange.
But this orange is round.
So is the Earth's sun.
It's not just in the old movies that the story is peddled. Advertisers formerly used it as a sales pitch for the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Before Columbus proved the world is round, people thought the horizon marked its edge. Today we know better.
But is it true? Is Christopher Columbus the one who discovered the world is round?
I am sure that by sailing west, I will find a shorter route from Europe to Asia.
Well, this is a rhetorical question, I hope. No.
Columbus biographer Hans Koning.
The circumference of the world was measured in 500 BC by the Greeks, and pretty damn accurate too. And in 1490, every man and every woman who had some kind of education knew that the world was round.
If you think about it, the ancients must have known the world was round. You always see Atlas carrying around a globe. You never see him with an Earth shaped like a pancake. And yet we hear all the time from credible sources that Columbus made the discovery. Professor James Lowen.
I remember giving a workshop for teachers in 1992, I mentioned in the course of this workshop, just kind of in an offhand way, that of course he didn't prove the world round. I actually figured that they all knew that. And there were gasps ricocheting through the auditorium, which made me realize that they didn't know that.
Are you going to sail clear to Cathay, or to the Indies, or even fall off the end of it?
The Catholic Church in 1491 held that the world was round. Sailors especially think that the world is round and knew the world was round because you can see a ship disappear hull first over the horizon because the roundness of the Earth gets in the way.
So how did we ever get this crazy idea that Chris had discovered the world is round? Well, it's because of stupidity. Somebody invented the story and nobody ever bothered to check it out. In this case, the somebody was a celebrated author who lived in this old house near the Hudson River in upstate New York. The author of Rip Van Winkle and Sleepy Hollow.
Now, straight ahead, you see a little picture.
Washington Irving.
That's Washington Irving's portrait.
It's fascinating to realize that the world became flat, not in 1492, but in about 1830, because that's when Washington Irving published his biography of Christopher Columbus, and he established the flat Earth myth. This was a best-selling biography throughout the rest of the 19th century.
In the biography, Irving has Columbus going to a council of scholars at the University of Salamanca in Spain, where he pleads his case that the Earth is round.
Christopher Columbus!
I thought I had got rid of this fellow Columbus.
They give him a hearing, then tell him he's nuts.
I say that. Stop, I say. And I wondered why they called you a dreamer.
Of course, it was Irving who was nuts, but there is something to his account. Columbus actually did go before a council of scholars at the University of Salamanca. And here's what happened. He argued that the Earth was about a third as large as they thought it was. They said, oh no, you're never going to be able to travel all the way east by going west. He said, yes, you can. Well, Columbus was wrong and the scholars were right. The Earth really was about as large as they said it was. But Columbus also was lucky. America was in the middle.
It is absolutely impossible for a 1492 sailing boat to sail with supplies from Spain to Japan. That's 12,000 sea miles. Columbus's charter was 3,000 miles. He was simply saved from his own stupidity by the fact that he happened to do something in between.
If Christopher Columbus did not discover the world is round, what then did he discover? Well, from the Indian perspective, of course, nothing at all. Robert Eaglestaff is a member of the Lakota Nation.
It'd be like me going to France and saying, I discover France, and there are people living there, and there are governments there. And then I come in and bring more people in and establish myself and take it over.
Well, from the European perspective, of course, he discovered America. That's why they call Columbus, Ohio, Columbus. It's why they've got a replica of the Santa Maria sitting downtown. But all this is a mistake. If you're going to give a European credit for discovering America, the credit belongs to Bjarne Haraldson. If fair is fair, this ought not to be Columbus, Ohio. It ought to be Bjarne, Ohio.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bjarne, Ohio, where the local time is 11 a.m.
To find out why you have to travel a long way from Ohio, you have to go all the way to Newfoundland, to a small fishing village located on the Canadian coast known as Lonceau Meadows. It was here in the 1960s that archaeologists discovered what had long been suspected but never proved, that the Scandinavians came upon America around the year 1000 AD, 500 years before Columbus, confirming the story told in the old Scandinavian sagas, oral history passed from generation to generation and eventually written down. The proof? The discovery of an iron nail used to repair a Norse ship. Subsequent digging turned up the foundations of several Norse buildings. So where does Bjarne come in? Well, according to Norse sagas, Bjarne is the one who first caught sight of the place. He never landed, but he went back home to Iceland and told everybody about it. Leif Erikson then came along with some settlers.
Yeah, sure.
Incidentally, just like Columbus, Bjarne came upon America by accident. He had left Iceland bound for Greenland when he got blown off course and nearly ran into it. So by all rights, this should be Bjarne, Ohio. But we didn't find anybody who wanted to change the name. We want to change the name of Columbus to Bjarne.
Bjarne?
Bjarne or...
To what?
Why that?
Who?
It's just Bjarne sounds weird.
It's pretty plain the people of Columbus are not about to change the name of their city, and who can blame them? But why is it we don't hear more about Bjarne?
Come learn who discovered America, Bjarne. Before the rest, the very first, Bjarne's where America starts. He traveled far, he traveled fast. He's the one that started our past, Bjarne. He made that trip.
The chief reason is that Scandinavian Americans haven't taken up his cause the same way that Italian Americans took up the cause of Columbus in the 19th century. The net effect is Bjarne remains a forgotten man. If Scandinavian Americans don't get busy soon, nobody's going to remember that Bjarne Haraldsson was the first European discoverer of America. Just for fun, we went to Washington State, which is home to one of the biggest Scandinavian communities in the country, Ballard. We came to find out if people there are making any kind of an effort to make Bjarne a household name.
Bjarne, yeah, well, they claim that he was there before Leif Erikson. No, what's true, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. We still have a great country here, no matter who discovered it.
Only one person knew about Bjarne, but they all knew about
Leif Erikson.
Leif Erikson. You got it? He happened to come into Vinland, isn't that right?
Because here, you know, October 9th is Columbus Day, but also Leif Erikson Day. And, you know, it doesn't seem like anybody want to recognize him. For what reasons, I don't know.
I don't know. He isn't very well known, I don't think. See, they screwed up someplace. Yeah, that could be true.
It looks like there'll never be a Bjarne Day parade. Columbus gets a parade right up New York's Fifth Avenue. A lot of people, of course, aren't happy about this, but polls indicate more than 60% of Americans still believe Columbus was a hero.
I'm Italian.
Oh, you like Columbus?
Yes, I love him.
We shouldn't be having any parade celebrating Columbus. Columbus stands for genocide.
Christopher Columbus does deserve to be remembered, if not as the European discoverer of America, then as the conqueror of America.
If you think about it, in 1492, Chris didn't do anything that Leif Erikson hadn't done in the year 1003 or so. What was significant about Columbus was what happened in 1493. And of course, in 1493, he turns right around, gets outfitted by Spain with 17 ships, with up to 2,000 fighting men, with attack dogs, with horses, and so on. And he comes back to take over the island of Haiti, to take over Hispaniola. Now that's new, that had never happened before.
But should we think of Columbus as a hero or a villain? Let's review the evidence.
First charge, he enslaved the Indians.
Has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor.
Verdict, guilty. Here he is showing off some Indian slaves to the king and queen. Looks innocent enough in the old films, but Columbus started the Atlantic slave trade, sending more than 5,000 Indian slaves to the Canary Islands in Spain.
In the name of the Holy Trinity, we can send from here all slaves which could be sold. One Indian is worth 3 Negroes. Although they die now, they will not always die. Christopher Columbus, in a letter to Ferdinand and Isabella.
Of course, slavery was accepted then, even among the Indians, but it was practiced so brutally under Columbus's rule that Queen Isabella herself eventually demanded an end to the practice.
Second charge, he exploited the Indians.
Verdict, guilty. He demanded that the natives on the island of Hispaniola, where Haiti and the Dominican Republic are today, grow crops, tend to livestock, and most importantly, mine gold.
There was some alluvial gold in the streams, and he immediately set the Indians to collecting that. They had to bring it to a Spanish fort, and then he got some kind of identification tag hung around their necks that they had done they had paid their tithes, and now they had to go back to these fields and find some more gold. And the Indians who were caught without this tag around their necks had their hands cut off.
Third charge, cruelty.
Verdict, guilty. He condoned the raping of Indian girls as young as age 10 and let their parents die without so much as a word of remorse.
Fourth charge, murder.
Verdict, guilty. By European standards at the time, Columbus was not a murderer, and he certainly did not hate Indians the way Hitler, say, hated Jews. But as far as the Indians were concerned, he was a murderer. As one historian says, Columbus was responsible for thousands of Indians dying from murder, mutilation, and suicide. When Columbus arrived in Hispaniola, by one estimate, there were about 250,000 Arawak Indians. There may have been even many more. Within 2 years, half had died. By 1550, just 50,000 were left. By 1650, there were none. This is how Indian life was described by a Spanish priest who journeyed to the New World in 1493.
The husbands and wives were together only once every 8 or 10 months, and when they met, they were so exhausted and depressed on both sides, they ceased to procreate. As for the newly born, they died early because their mothers, overworked and famished, had no milk to nurse them. And for this reason, while I was in Cuba, 7,000 children died in 3 months. Some mothers even drowned their babies from sheer desperation. Bartolomé de las Casas.
Columbus was, of course, a great and courageous sailor as well as a killer, which raises the question, what do we tell our kids?
He discovered a very nice country.
Yeah, he's a hero.
If he did all that killing, we shouldn't be celebrating the parade.
Sure, he's a good guy.
You remember the old story about the spices, that it's the bad old Turks who had cut off the spice trade to the Indies?
And such a route has been badly needed since the Turks have captured Constantinople, dear brother.
Well, you can forget that old story.
And a lot of teachers are still teaching this. Those irrational Turks, they don't even understand business, and they just stop the spice trade kind of out of spite. Well, this isn't true. They made money off of the spice trade. Why would they stop it?
The reason for that voyage was gold. That's what Columbus was doing. He was out for riches. And he also, if you believe him, he wanted to help spread Christianity. Then there's that other old story. Queen Isabella, she was going to pawn her jewels to help finance the first Columbus trip. Well, she offered to pawn her jewels, but she didn't ever have to do it. The government paid for the trip. So how do we get so many wrong-headed ideas about Columbus? In a way, it's for a simple reason: the textbooks. Scholars have corrected the old mistakes, but the textbooks keep repeating them. The textbooks also tend to omit anything that's controversial or negative. This one I used myself in high school, and it's still in use today. It says the sailors on Columbus's ship were frightened that they might fall off the edge of the earth. The old flat earth nonsense.
They begged Columbus to return. Some wept like babies.
I think that this happens because no historian can be expert about all of the different time periods in American history. And you don't have to be that expert, but still they're lazy. So instead of studying the new research about Columbus, they tend to clone other textbooks. And therefore, a mistake made in 1890, or in the case of the round world, or the flat world, in 1832, that mistake gets perpetuated in 1992 and in 1996.
Most textbooks in use today do not actually peddle the old flat earth story. But according to Professor Lowen, who made a thorough survey of a dozen textbooks, neither do they counter it effectively.
They do it in such ineffective language that although you can recognize if you read carefully that everybody knew the world was round, it still looks like Columbus did something about proving it round.
Getting Columbus wrong is probably the worst offense of the textbooks. Of all people, they should get Columbus right. But they also get other things wrong. Virtually all of them leave the impression that the Americas were sparsely populated when Columbus arrived. Well, that's what used to be thought. But research in the last 40 years has shown that there probably were as many people living in the New World as in all of Europe. 10 to 20 million in North America, some 25 million in Mexico. In all, both in North and South America, between 60 and 90 million people. Okay, so it looks like textbooks go a long way in making myths. But they're not the only ones who get the explorers wrong. It just so happens that the people who make maps don't do much better. The map makers call this the Hudson River. But was Henry Hudson the first European to discover it? No. He didn't discover the river, the strait, or the bay that bear his name. Giovanni de Verrazzano did, 85 years before Henry Hudson came along. Hudson simply explored the river. Hudson's only connection with the bay is that he died there, after his crew, sick and tired of his autocratic ways, staged a violent revolt against him. And Verrazzano, after a couple of centuries of being ignored, he finally got a bridge named after him. This soaring edifice over the Hudson River. The biggest blunder the map makers ever made is to call America, America. And the man responsible for this howler? A German mapmaker by the name of Martin Wasmuller. Wasmuller's mistake was to believe an account written by the Italian navigator Amerigo Vespucci, who claimed to have landed on the continent in 1497, a full year before Columbus, giving Columbus a bad case of heartburn, and giving us the wrong title of a song.
God bless Bjarne, land that I love.
Unfortunately, Amerigo was a notorious liar. He just made up the whole story. Is it beginning to seem as if a lot of the explorers were scoundrels? They were, but it's kind of hushed up. Take Balboa, the fellow who's credited with discovering the Pacific Ocean. What they show you in the textbooks is a nice picture of him looking out over the Pacific. Very noble stuff. What they don't show you is how he got there. It was by doing what a lot of European explorers did. He collected a huge army of man-eating dogs and then let them loose on the Indians who had the bad luck to cross his path. In one awful case, he had the dogs kill nearly 600 villagers. Balboa explained afterwards he had the village wiped out, well, because the chief liked to dress up in women's clothing. Even the romantic explorers have a secret shady past, like Ponce de Leon. We hear a lot about his fabled search for the fountain of youth.
Gives me a big glass, I think.
But the real reason he went to Florida? It was to capture slaves. Bad as the textbook writers and the mapmakers are at history, there's one group even worse, movie makers. Take the Disney hit Pocahontas, which features the story of explorer John Smith, who is reputed to have fallen head over heels for the Indian princess in one of the greatest love stories of all time. You may want to send the kids out of the room for this one. John Smith and Pocahontas would be lovers? Well, if they were, Smith should have been prosecuted for child abuse. At the time they met, he was in his 30s, she was about age 10 or 11. Historian Helen Roundtree.
She wasn't a lovely nubile maiden. She was an Indian girl, so she was naked and bald when John Smith met her.
Anyway, it wasn't John Smith she married. They were just friends. It was another Englishman, John Rolfe. But no matter, it's Smith and Pocahontas we think were the lovebirds. And in the end, what really happens to Pocahontas? Well, she gets kidnapped by the whites, then she falls in love with John Rolfe, she marries, she goes to Europe, and at age 22, she dies from smallpox. Some romance. I'd like to end on a quote. It's from Santa Anna, the fellow who gave us that great old line about how if you don't remember the past, you're condemned to repeat it. Well, he had another good line that I really like. History is always written wrong, so always needs to be rewritten. That's no myth. I'm Rick Shenkman.